Hello, and welcome to Genesis, where conversation begins about tough theological, social, and political issues. Hey, I'm Dr. Clifton Clark, your host today, and I want to talk to you about some important issues. I've just come from a trip across Europe, and I can really say that across the globe, fractures are spreading like cracks in a fragile vessel. In Europe, for example, nationalism rises while refugees knock on closed doors. In Africa, ethnic conflicts and economic disparities divide nations that long for peace. In Asia, rapid modernization collides with deep traditions, leaving generations in tension. And in the Middle East, as we all know, war and religious hostility continues to disparate. In the Middle East, war and religious hostilities continue to displace families and devastate cities. Here in America, our beloved country is cracking under the weight of its own contradictions. Truth has become slippery and morality negotiable. Families don't just argue, they fracture. Friends don't just disagree, they cut one another off. Friends, families are all in disarray. Communities don't differ, they divide. Churches don't just struggle, they splinter. The culture feeds on outrage like oxygen, and the church is tempted to inhale the same toxic air. The hour is urgent. Our politics divides us. Our media polarizes us. Our hatred consumes us and is increasingly violent. Recently, Melissa Hortman and her husband were shot dead in their homes at 3 a.m., leaving their kids behind in what was considered a politically motivated killing. And most recently, Charlie Kirk was shot and killed in broad daylight, leaving his wife a widow and children without father. There was a mass shooting which occurred in Minneapolis, where children, whilst praying in the church, were gunned down and 2 killed in cold blood. We are a nation intoxicated by division, addicted to partisanship, and blinded by our own self-righteousness. And here's the tragedy of it all. The church, God's holy, set-apart people, sometimes sounds no different than the world. Instead of being voices of reconciliation, we become echo chambers. We echo the rhetoric of division. Instead of standing on Christ, we choose sides. This is not just a cultural turbulence. It's a spiritual emergency, I would argue. We are not simply living through interesting times. We are standing in dangerous moments where the witness of the church hangs in the balance. The fractures we see in our country today and around the world are not merely political squabbles. They represent profound breakdown in trust, identity, and shared moral vision. The atmosphere that I've just tried to map out for you around our own globe and indeed our own country. This atmosphere of political and ideological rivalry and cultural competition bears a striking resemblance to the first century city of Corinth. Like our modern cities, Corinth was a bustling, diverse, and prosperous city, yet beneath its success lay bitter divisions. There, as here, the church itself was tempted to absorb the world's squabbles and quarrels rather than transcend them. Paul's letter to the Corinthians, then, are not outdated artifacts of early Christian writings. They are mirrors held up to our own fractured age. But Paul's writing to that divided church asked a piercing question that we need to ask ourselves today as the global church. And that is Christ divided? Today, I want us to reflect on and to remind you and remind ourselves as disciples of Jesus, what is our role in the world as a church? I want to remind us of our role in the world is not to mirror its fractures, the world's fractures, but to be a model of unity of the kingdom. I want to mention three things. Number one, the peril of division. And in Paul's writing to the Corinthians, Paul opens his letters with this appeal. And it states, and I quote, that you all agree and that there be no division among you. In Corinth, believers claimed, as many are claiming today, even within the church, divided loyalties. Some would say, I follow Paul's camp. Paul was a missionary, the go-getter, the church planter, the fearless leader who was forging a way to move Christianity from a Jewish location to a global movement. Paul was the apostle to the Gentiles. And many had the same missionary drive, and they said, I am of Paul's camp, bring in the Gentiles. I am of the progressive camp. Don't allow the Gentiles to be weighed down with the law. Some would argue, I follow Apollos' camp. And so you had the Apollos camp. Apollos was the eloquent Greek from Alexandria. He was intellectual, progressive, and a Greek leader. He was the one that many of the elite would love to follow. They loved its diction, its philosophy, its poise, and he really reflected the upper echelons, if you like, of the church. And therefore we had, I am of Apollos' camp. We also had those who were the traditionalists who said, I am of Cephas or Peter's camp. The traditionalist who stands for the values of the original Jewish foundation of their faith. They wanted to maintain the Jewish distinctives of the Christian faith, the Jewish distinctives of this new Christian movement. Then you had those who were the purists who smugly declared and asserted, I am of Christ's camp. And they would say that we do not follow men, we follow Christ and Christ alone. Now, each of these camps in Corinth elevated their leader, their style, their philosophies. But in so doing, the church simply mirrored the fractures of the society itself. And they were not modeling Christ. Just like our world today, and indeed our country, Corinth was marked by class division, loyalty to powers and privilege, the love of eloquence and philosophies and apologetics and politics and different ideologies. And those same divisions began to spill into the church. The divisions of the world became the divisions in the church. And we can see this mirrored in many aspects of the Christian text, biblical text, where the wealthy feasted while the poor was hungry. Some aligned themselves with power, the powerful leaders. Others prided themselves on the intellectual and sophistication of their approach to understanding this new faith. Still others clung tightly to ethnic identity and Jewish superiority. But let me tell you, the church is not a club of like-minded groups. The church is a spirit-birthed, eschatological people of God. To divide the body is like dividing Christ himself. It's like Christ himself was fractured. And when the church divides along politics or political lines, tribal lines, ethnic lines, cultural lines, we preach a counter-gospel that Christ is not sufficient to unite us. Secondly, the priority of the cruciform, cross-shaped, I should say, identity. Paul's piercing question still echoes today. Is Christ divided? If our allegiance fracture around leaders, tribes, parties, or ideologies, then we are living as if Christ himself were fractured. Paul insisted, and we indeed must insist today, that our true identity is not in personalities, camps, ideologies, parties, but in the cross of Christ. To the world, that may sound frivolous and trivial, and indeed, the cross looks foolishness to the world. But it's the foolish things of the world that Christ uses. weakness, failure, and the scandal of the cross. But to us who are being saved, it is the power of God. And as the world reaches out to try to find unity, we must assert it can only be found through the power of God. In Corinth, wisdom was measured by eloquence, success by status, and strength by influence. But Paul declares that the cross overturned every one of those measures. Imagine when visitors come to our churches, what do they see? Will they see the same tribalism, political divisions, and cultural wars and so on that they left outside, with campaign slogans and cultural cliques and ideological suspicions? Or will they see something utterly different? A people bound across difference because their citizenship is in heaven. You see, the cross is not just an abstract symbol. It's the defining act of God that reorientates human identity. At the cross, every human badge of worth, wealth, ethnicity, political power, cultural sophistication is laid down. St. Augustine reminds us in the City of God that we are citizens of the heavenly city, living amongst the earthly one, but not consumed by its division. To root our identity in the cross is to confess that Christ alone defines us. Rooting our identity in the cross means I no longer define myself by the fractures that I see in society. It means I refuse to let politics dictate my fellowship or cultures determine who I call my brother or sister. It means I lay down my rights, my preferences, my pride for the sake of love. It means the church is not the chaplain for the left or right politics. We are ambassadors of another kingdom. The Corinthians wanted identity from leaders, rhetoric, and status, the very thing that their culture valued. But Paul redirected them to the scandalous saving cross, and so must we. Our identity is in Paul, Apollos, Cephas, or cultural tribes. No, it is in Christ and Him crucified. That's what we must assert in these trying times. And when the church embraces that cruciform identity, it becomes the one place on earth where the world's division can truly be healed. And lastly, the practice of love as the bond of witness. Jesus prayed that His followers would be one, so that the world may know and believe. You see, unity then is not peripheral, but central to the missional identity of the church. This unity does not merely create tension, it undermines the gospel itself. At the foot of the cross, the ground is level. Rich, poor, black, white, those who are on the left and on the right and in between, Republicans, Democrats, independents, whatever it is, at the foot of the cross, we are all in need of the blood-stained banner of Christ. What divides us in the world cannot define us in Christ. Paul describes love as the sondesmos. The sondesmos is the ligament that binds the body together. Love is not sentiments, but the connective tissues of the new humanity. And so, my friends, let me encourage you today to put your trust in Christ, put your faith in Him, and assert that, yes, we are not talking about uniformity, but we're talking about unity. And we are saying that we all, in spite of our differences, find our most important identity in Christ and in Christ alone. God bless you, and see you next time.